All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Good morning and welcome to All Indiana Politics. I'm Garrett Bergquist in for Phil Sanchez. Thousands of suspected undocumented immigrants are either in federal custody or have been deported. The sweeps began as soon as President Donald Trump took office, and Governor Mike Braun has ordered state law enforcement agencies to assist whenever possible. The governor's order comes as federal authorities are arresting thousands of suspected undocumented immigrants around the country.
This executive order is about putting the spirit of Indiana behind what most Americans are for.
The order directs statewide law enforcement agencies, such as the state police, to notify the State Intelligence Fusion Center if they believe a criminal suspect is in the country illegally. The order is limited to people with a criminal history or those suspected of a felony, espionage, or a public safety threat. The Fusion Center would have to notify Immigration and Customs Enforcement if its investigators conclude the information is valid. After that, it's up to ICE.
We're going to do what the federal government asks us to do that's reasonable to help find the most egregious examples of illegal immigrants that have committed egregious crimes. And I'm going to direct any of our authorities to not resist, and hopefully they'll be compliant on their own.
We ask our local law enforcement officers to do a variety of things. We ask them to pick up the stray dogs. We ask them to be social workers to mental health issues. We ask them to take care of our homeless. We ask them to prevent crime. We ask them to intercept crime. We ask them to deal with drug issues. And now we're asking another aspect of them.
Garcia Wilburn says Braun's order doesn't really change law enforcement's day-to-day activities, but she says it could erode immigrants' trust in law enforcement.
And those partnerships are critical because when somebody helps police to solve a crime, that puts their immigration status at an entire another level. The federal government has long-standing relationships with expediting people who are cooperating.
Meanwhile, the chief of Indiana's largest police department says his officers will not take part in any raids. IMPD Chief Chris Bailey says local law enforcement, including the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, does not have the authority to enforce federal immigration laws. IMPD has not been asked to take part in immigration sweeps, nor do we have any intention of doing so. This is not our role. He goes on to say IMPD does not inquire about an individual's immigration status during routine investigations. In response, Senator Jim Banks tells me IMPD should lose access to federal law enforcement grants. He also tells me he favors deporting everyone in the country unlawfully, even if it means breaking up so-called mixed status families. Let's bring in Senator Jim Banks. Senator, welcome back to the program.
Good to be with you.
So federal immigration officials have already arrested thousands of suspected undocumented immigrants since President Trump took office. What can you tell us about arrests here in Indiana?
Well, there have been a number. I can't tell you an exact number, but I can tell you that there have been 7,000 deportations and then an additional 3,000 plus arrests just in the first week of President Trump's time in office. The most astonishing part about that to me is that we knew where these violent criminal illegals were, and in the last administration, they didn't do anything about it. It took Donald Trump to come to office and immediately instruct ICE to go out and begin the process of arresting illegals who have committed violent crimes to send them back to where they came from. So he's off to an aggressive, strong beginning. There's a lot more to do, but President Trump is not going to waste any time.
Now, there have been some moves on the state and local levels as well. Here in Indiana, the Hamilton County Sheriff this week announced that his office would join the 287G program, and then Governor Mike Braun issued an executive order requiring state law enforcement agencies to cooperate with ICE when asked. Is this a coordinated effort among federal, state, and local authorities?
Yeah, it really is. My hat's off to Governor Braun, who's off to a great start as our next governor, from signing the executive order doing away with DEI in the state government, and then this week also signing an executive order to instruct the state's law enforcement agencies to back up the federal government to go after violent criminals who are in the country illegally. So unfortunately, the police chief in Indianapolis, for example, has said that he won't abide by the federal law and work with the federal government to do this. And my message to the police chief and others who want to block these efforts to deport illegals, especially those who are violent criminals, is that I'm exploring ways that we can take away your federal grants that go to your law enforcement agencies if you don't back up the federal government. This is important. This is what President Trump was overwhelmingly elected to do on Election Day, and he's off to a great start. It's a shame that we have some local Democrat officials who are trying to block him.
So I want to be clear here. If local or county law enforcement agencies choose not to take part in any form of immigration actions, and in a lot of cases they already don't have that authority, or their authority is extremely limited, you are considering pulling their federal grant?
Yeah, that's exactly right. If local city police chiefs, like the police chief in Indianapolis, suggest that he's going to block those efforts by ICE or the federal government to deport illegals, especially criminals who are in the country illegally, then I'm exploring ways to take away federal grants that go to those law enforcement agencies.
What should be done about so-called mixed status families? Those are families where you might have one parent who is a U.S. citizen or someone who is documented, and then another parent who is an undocumented immigrant.
Again, my message is clear. If you came to this country illegally, you should go back to where you came from and then try to enter this country through the legal process. But President Trump is focused on right now on deporting criminals and those who have committed violent crimes. That's what ICE is focused on at the moment. With well over 10 million illegals, the focus has to be, murderers that we know are in the country, that Joe Biden knew where they were and allowed to stay in this country. That's what ICE is focused on at the moment. But if you came to America illegally, you should go back to where you came from. If you don't, then at some point, you're likely to be deported on Donald Trump's watch, and I fully support that.
Immigrants' rights groups say that one of the concerns that they have is legal immigrants or U.S. citizens being mistakenly deported. What is being done to prevent that?
Well, I'm not aware of that happening. I mean, that sounds like a scare tactic by some of these groups who don't want illegals to be deported. So if there are good examples of that happening, then we should correct it. But what ICE is focused on is going out and using the full force of the federal government to go out and identify these violent criminals and get them out of our country. I mean, it's really as simple as that. What the Senate is doing is we're focused on backing up that effort and giving President Trump more resources to get it done. It's a massive effort. It's costly, but the cost of allowing these illegals to stay in our country is even greater. And Donald Trump was elected on Election Day, so was I, elected to the Senate to make sure that this happens. But I welcome that if these immigration rights advocates and groups have real examples of that happening instead of scare tactics or boogeyman arguments, I'm open to hearing about it, but I don't think that's really happening.
What about the potential economic fallout from this? There are some estimates that say, for example, as many as 25% of farm workers and as many as 20% of building maintenance workers, such as janitors, are undocumented immigrants.
There are legal ways for farms and businesses to find foreign labor. I mean, go through that process. Don't take advantage of illegals who come into this country. And you're taking advantage of them, first of all, but you're also taking advantage of American workers. That's just a simple fact. So this is good for American workers, for American wages, and healthy for the long-term stability of this country. I think that it's as simple as that. The American people get it. That's why they gave Donald Trump the popular vote, the mandate on Election Day, a majority in the Senate, a majority in the House to get this done. It's our top focus right now in the United States Senate, and I fully support President Trump and what he's trying to do.
Coming up, we turn to Indiana's best political team as immigration comes to the forefront.
Looking for ways to save on your energy bills? AES Indiana has you covered. From smart thermostats to home energy assessments, we offer simple solutions to keep your home comfortable and your costs down. AES can help you save money and energy with kits, tips, rebates, and more. Visit aesindiana.com/ways to save to learn more about how we can help you save money. AES Indiana, helping you discover real ways to save.
Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Republican Whitley Yates and Democrat Ariel Brandy. Whitley, let's begin with Braun's order to state law enforcement. Could this cause immigrants, regardless of status, to stop cooperating with police?
I don't believe so. To be quite honest, this is specifically for those that have come into the country that are undocumented and illegal. If you have status and you're able to prove that you are a citizen, it should not impact you at all. But the truth is that the generosity of America has been taken for granted. And it's one thing to not only come into this country illegally, but then to commit crimes once you're here is completely despicable. We don't need any help in that area. We're trying to get that under control as it is. And so Trump's very strong stance on immigration, coupled with the state's responses, is what is going to make this effort to be successful.
Ariel, I'll let you respond to that as well, but also in practice, how likely are we to see the sort of large-scale arrests here in Indiana that we've seen in other states?
I mean, right now, I feel like there's just this fear in the community for a lot of immigrants on all levels. I mean, it's a fear to be able to think about if you can go to the grocery store or drop your kids off at school, and if ICE is going to show up at your door and detain you, whether or not they deem you as a criminal. I think right now, folks are scared, and rightfully so. You know, they have come to this country in order to seek safety, but also opportunity in the land of the free, and to be told that they're going to be deported and also in some cases racially profiled in a way in which they're then returned to a country that they don't know. I think that it's unfortunate for us that we've kind of painted this picture as Americans and as a state that this is how we feel about immigrants and refugees. And I wish that we would take a different approach, because this type of harsh approach to immigration, I don't think makes for a state where we feel like we value Hoosiers and everyone that comes here in order to have opportunity and to have a good quality paying job. Right now, there's fear in the community, and rightfully so.
We just heard Senator Banks threaten to pull federal funding for law enforcement agencies that don't participate in immigration enforcement. Ariel, should there be consequences for jurisdictions that refuse to help federal authorities when asked?
I don't think so. I think right now that our local law enforcement and sheriff's office are doing what they can with the capacity that they have. So many of them have shown up and said already, look, we already follow some of these rules and mandates already. So to enforce that on us and to say that we have to do it, a lot of them have said we just don't have the time. We don't have the resources or the capacity to actually do those things, nor do we have that problem in our community. So to enforce that and to say that you'll take away funding and kind of put folks' jobs at jeopardy, I mean, it's unfair that we've come to this point in process when there are actual crimes happening in communities in which these officers need to be able to be at the forefront of being able to solve.
Whitley, I'll let you respond to some of those points as well, but also, doesn't Banks' threat put people who live in those communities at risk?
Absolutely not. If you want to receive federal funding but don't want to follow federal guidelines, then why would you receive the federal funding? And let's go back to some of the points that Ariel made. The truth is that they're not running into Whole Foods and trying to check and see if you have legal status. They're going after people who have committed crimes. Now, if in the process other people who are undocumented get caught up in that, well, that was the chance that they took when they made the decision to come into this country illegally. And so the fear should not be for anyone that has the foundational documents documents necessary to stay. The fear would be anyone who bypassed the system that we already have in place to still come to this country, knowing that they don't have the proper documentation, not only to come, but to stay. So if you are a refugee and haven't gone through that process and circumvented that process, well, you should be afraid because you have now broken a federal law. And so I don't think that we should have coddle for any criminals who've broken federal law. We have enough lawbreakers right here that are American citizens already, and we don't need any help. What we should be doing is protecting Hoosiers and protecting Americans by making sure that the sovereignty of this nation is safe by protecting and closing our borders.
Ariel and Whitley, stick around. When we come back, we'll turn to Governor Mike Braun's State of the State speech and the protests that accompanied it. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics. Still with us are Democrat Ariel Brandy and Republican Whitley Yates. Governor Mike Braun gave his first State of the State speech on Wednesday night. Almost the entire Indiana Black Legislative Caucus chose not to attend. Instead, they went to a unity rally that was held on the 4th floor while the speech was going on. This was in response to his order ending the state's DEI efforts and the decision not to provide additional grant funding to Martin University. Ariel, Republican leaders called the IBLC's move divisive. Do they have a point?
No, I don't think that it was divisive at all. I think they're responding to something that is directly impacting their community, and rightfully so. Martin University is our only Black university that we had in our state, but also, too, when you look at the cuts that are happening nationally and in state when it comes to DEI work and how we are talking about communities of color, I mean, they wanted to just bring folks together to just continue to reiterate this is an important issue to us. It should be an important issue to all Hoosiers. And we have to still hold Governor Braun accountable and get him to understand how this is going to impact us. I don't think it was divisive. I saw people from all backgrounds there at the State House that night. And I don't think that it took it away from the message that the governor had for everyone.
Whitley, the state's own studies show that minority-owned businesses get state contracts at a rate far below that of white-owned businesses. Should Braun consider reinstating at least some DEI-related programs?
So what you have done there, Garrett, is you've conflated the DEI executive order with the Division of Supplier Diversity and IDOA office, which is completely separate and has not been affected by his executive order. But to go back to the question that you asked, Ariel, absolutely it was divisive, and it was also disingenuous, because the truth of the matter is that Martin University is a private school and a private university, and it is not likely that we would be providing state funds to a private institution, although there was a one-time allotment. And the members of the Black Legislative Caucus that voted for that allotment of money knew that it was a one-time allotment. And so the fact that they are utilizing this as a political bargaining chip to rally people around the idea that Governor Braun is somehow targeting Martin University is disingenuous. And then that, coupled with the outrage over the DEI office that had already been shut down because it was funded through a grant and not codified, is also once again disingenuous. The truth is that the super minority in the State House needs Republican support and needs to be able to have civil conversations with each other and work together to advocate for everyone. But utilizing this opportunity in the state of the state to create division was not that moment.
So in his speech, Braun again urged lawmakers to pass his property tax plan. That was the first major policy point that he hit on in that speech. Senate President Pro Tem Rod Bray told me after the speech that he expected hearings to begin in about 2 weeks. And actually, at last check, some hearings were already scheduled for that bill for this coming week. Whitley, Democrats on Wednesday night called the plan a farce. That was the exact term they used. They say the plan will force local governments to raise local income taxes and other sources of revenue. Should local governments be concerned about the cuts and caps that Braun has proposed?
I think that we should be concerned about the rising property taxes and how that money has gone away from Hoosiers and what we are going to do specifically for the most vulnerable populations that are paying, like my parents and my grandparents and those that are on a fixed income and retired. And his plan not only addresses the caps, but also addresses the senior citizens. And so the problem that I have is that if you want to give criticism without constructive feedback on what the policy should do, then you are then part of the problem. The question you have to ask is, what is it that local governments want to see, as opposed to just lambasting the policies that have been presented?
Ariel, I've got about a minute left. Republicans say they can save millions in new efficiencies in state government, and they say local government should do the same in order to offset a lot of those cuts. How feasible is this?
I mean, I think that it puts a lot of pressure on our local governments who are already constrained as is, and looking at how they can navigate resources and things like that. I mean, right now, to be stuck on property taxes when there are so many other important issues in our state that are happening. I mean, I just feel like I wish I could have gotten more out of the state out of state address to be able to address some of the other issues that I feel are important to Hoosiers right now, and to place that type of burden on local governments. I mean, I don't know how folks are going to react to that. And I could see there being some pushback because we don't want to have to see other funding taken away from law enforcement, our fire departments, our schools.
Right, we will have to leave it there. Thank you both. We will be right back. Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. And be sure to check out the All Indiana Politics podcast online at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.